My baby, what have they done to my baby? The Mirage 2000. It's been nerfed into the ground and I am coping. Or am I? Not actually. I want to talk about the Mirage 2000 on the dev server and a couple of the different flight model changes in addition to that. But I have smaller opinions about the other flight models because they're all garbage anyways, and they're not the Mirage 2000, they're not the Triangle. So what happened to our darling little Triangle? Well, basically what has happened is Gaijin has buffed the sustained turn rate at high speeds while nerfing the turn rate at lower speeds. On top of that, the other thing that has changed is the bleed rates. So basically, beforehand, we had a semi-believable bleed rate value, at least at high speed, and now that is no longer the case. They have basically taken the plane and turned it into a baby Griffin, but worse, is the best way to put it. And it means that a lot of the matchups that the Mirage 2000 used to have are going to be fundamentally different. Even at sea level, the initial turn rate is also underperforming. My understanding is the Mirage 2000 is supposed to have an initial turn rate of around 28 degrees per second, maybe like 28.5, and currently it kind of sits around 25 to 26 and a half, I want to say. And what this means is that basically in your initial turns, when you go past the merge, you're kind of on par with the F-16. You're kind of inferior to an F-15. And because you retain energy, if you take the old line, if you try to play it the way that you used to, you're going to find that you end up shooting out in front of the other player, and it means that you're going to find yourself more easily put on the defensive, especially in those initial turns. It means that the way that this plane matches up against its opposition, because of the bleed rate, because of the lack of initial turn, is kind of incongruous to what you would expect. Now, is the flight model cooked? No, I don't think so yet, but it's going to require more testing. It's going to require me to test it against a lot of different people, because usually what happens with these things is the flight model is changed, and then we have to relearn and learn how the plane flies now and try to forget the things that we learned in the last 6 or 7 months to a year. And what this means is, in practicality, we're going to have to figure out some way to utilize the increased energy retention and also work around the reduced initial turn rate, and also work around the reduced low speed performance. Is it impossible? I don't know. This is going to fluctuate if this flight model comes to the live server. For my RB folks, this flight model might be cooked because the way the instructor works is different than the way the sim controls in damping modes works. There are different limitations. So it means that what might be a limitation that is something that's overcomable in sim is something that is crippling in Air RB. For sim, this flight model is not quite cooked, but it might be soft-boiled. So far, I have only tested the Mirage 2000 against two people that I consider to be fairly decent. I tested against Rider 2, and I've tested against Shezarade. Now, the problem with testing against both of these folks is that they both have a very similar dueling style. It's a lot of wide circles, and it's a lot of energy conservation. And because both of these guys stick to a similar rhythm, the results that I had against both of them were more or less the same. That doesn't mean that that is the only plan that could work. One of the things that I will have to test once the flight model comes to the live server is basically what it can do when the other guy plays the initial turns more aggressively than you possibly can. Because you might be able to put the thing so far on the back foot that it really can't do anything from there, even with the energy retention and even with the low speed handling. With that being said, let's get into some fights. This first fight, you're going to really see the new changes to the flight model really manifest itself. You're really going to see that energy retention, because I'm going in kind of the same way that I normally do, where I try to go in a little bit fast because I know that the plane likes to lose speed, or at least that's my perception going into it. Which means if you went in a little bit too slow, it was a little bit easier for an F-16 to get you into some situation where you're energy trapped. Now, I'm coming around this circle. I'm pulling as hard as I can. I've got the stick basically into my lap, and I am maintaining 900 kph. I have to actually cut the throttle a little bit to try to match his circle here. And as he comes across here, he's actually gained a little bit of position. I have to cut throttle even again, just a little bit, to try to get below what works out to be a compression zone. And because I spent a little bit of time compressed, I conserve energy here, but he's got the shot. And That's it. That's the first one. So the energy retention is something that can very easily work against you. Our second fight here, I'm going to try to enter in with a little bit lower speed because I know that that energy retention did not really help me. I haven't found out the energy retention line to really throw the plane into a position where the F-16C can't really cope with it. And I also want to test the low speed performance of the plane and see in practice how big of a difference it actually makes. So we're going to come in a little bit slower. And ideally, I think I should be around Mach 0.7 instead of Mach 0.8. I haven't played the plane enough in the new configuration to really know. This is a work in progress. Now, as I come up, one of the things I'm looking for is when he goes flat like this, because I cut inside of a circle, I kind of like to use this to retain energy and come down and close the distance. But he keeps the distance on me. So now I'm thinking, do I need to retain energy or do I need to sit inside the radius? And what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to try to sit inside the radius. Like, I don't care if I go slow here, because it's still going to put him in front of me, hopefully at close range. And as he goes up, the telltale sign that I'm looking for is those contrails on the wings. Because once the F-16C gets slow, I think I have a pretty decent advantage. Now, he comes in, he misses that attack, and I throw the plane immediately into a counterattack. But this is where you can see that the difference in the low-speed handling. Normally, you would kind of just flip around, and I would have a very reasonably stable first shot there. But because of the low-speed changes, there's just enough there that the margin of error that the F-16C has and the margin of error that you have, that gap has closed. The third fight is when we finally start cooking again. We're going to come in a little bit faster, but instead of opening at a 45-degree angle, we're going to kind of go up in a 90. This way we can maximize the altitude we have and maximize the amount of speed that we bleed so that we can start pulling harder a little bit sooner. And we're going to try to bait him up into us, because if he doesn't hit this shot, we have a good chance of getting him slow and getting into position. And that's exactly what we're going to do here. As we cut inside of the radius, as he bleeds his speed, he's bleeding his speed in front of us. And as long as we're at these low speeds, we have a pretty good chance. And we have the position we want. We're starting to see a lot of some of the same stuff that we're used to seeing in the Mirage. Mainly the F-16 going around in a big circle and the Mirage going around in a little circle. But unlike the old flight model, you kind of have to work your way to get to the small circle position. It's really weird. It's hard to explain. It's something you might not have success with the AirRB mouse aim controls, because the margin of error that you have against an aggressive F-16 or an aggressive anything, because of the way that mouse aim instructor might be gimped, might just be impossible. So, like, yeah, I'm doing fine with it in sim so far, but the flight model could be cooked. Anyways, we're going to sit behind him, spray all of our ammo. We have the really exciting dev server glitch of invisible planes. Hopefully it doesn't make it to live. Sometimes this random crap does. We shoot another Magic 2. Nothing happens. Probably didn't hit the arming distance, but we're just going to shoot him out of the sky here as soon as our guns automatically reload. And you can see right here, he's working pretty hard in the F-16. He's got probably the manual controls on. I'm just basing that on the stall right there. And even in manual versus manual or damping versus damping, once this gets to low speed, it's kind of the Mirage 2000's fight to lose, I think, but it also is a lot closer than it used to be. And so overall, I wouldn't want to get into a bad position. You can't necessarily crutch on the low speed handling with the plane as hard as you used to be able to, which overall I think is a reasonably decent change. Like, it does match the sustained turn rate graph a little bit better. Everything else is worse though. And now we're going to transition it to classic Mirage thing. Same flight model, come in a little bit slower, use a little bit of air brake, pop over the top, and get the Magic 2 shot. He's doing a big circle. We're going to cut inside of it, and we're going to use the Magic 2 to kind of bridge the gap here. We're trying to figure out basically how slow can we go and what can we get away with now. We don't need to retain as much speed as we used to at the start, because if we retain the speed at the start like we used to, we can't really bleed it at will. But that trajectory there seemed to work. Doesn't mean there's not a counter, but it's going to take some time to figure everything out, figure out where this thing actually matches up, because right now it seems pretty deceiving. I think that in principle the plane might be able to be cooked pretty easily by something like a very aggressive F-15 or a very aggressive F-16. But because Ryder's doing these big circles, he's playing the F-16 to its strengths on paper, the Magic 2 is really able to bridge that gap. And the Magic 2 really does not forgive any mistakes in any kind of trajectory. It doesn't forgive any mistakes in your flare pattern either. Now, as he comes in here, as he attacks, I go immediately into a counter, and we're going to get our nose on just a little bit sooner. And as he dodges there, as he doesn't pull in, we're going to go up, and he's going to try to energy trap us. But just because we're energy trapped doesn't mean he's going to be able to drop his nose quick enough to actually put it on us. So even though we're energy trapped, we're kind of sitting below him. We're inside of a circle where he can pull right now, and we're going to sit inside of it. As he comes down, we have manual controls on. We step on the rudder, and as he shoots out below us, we're going to get our position back. And right here we shoot, and we did not score. But as he blows the manual controls there, he flies back in, and we get the kill there. And that is another gun kill. Nothing super special. Like, I don't want anyone to take these as gospel truth, because I put more effort into learning these planes than just doing like 2 random duels. And I'm going to cut out some of these duels, because this is one of the things that happens for about around 4 or 5 of them, is basically the Magic 2 bridges the gap. The energy's there, but the position isn't. And it's kind of the same trajectory over and over again, basically forcing the Magic 2 shot against the F-16s, against someone who actually does the wide circles and tries to do the energy, is like a pretty darn good option in this plane. The plane still seems to be plenty deadly once things get to low speed, and there's still like a couple of the same things I still look for. Like, I'm pulling a lot of lead here while I'm going slow, and I'm going to ease off and kind of accelerate just a little bit here, get my nose in front of him, and as I'm cutting off his turn there, yeah, I get my nose behind him, but I was doing that to get my speed back up. And then I pull lead again, and I'm trying to basically cut him off. Now, if this doesn't hit, that gunshot would not be very good, but because it's a Magic 2, it just kind of does what it does. Now, let's move on to the MiG-23. The MLD in this case, I'm not testing out the ML, but the MLD, the MLA, the ML, they were all nerfed by this guy, Ride-R2, and Reddit was not very happy, because on paper, the MiG-23 MLD is now pretty mediocre, or at least it seems to be that way. In practice, at least in Sim, I don't think that's going to be the case. The plane's energy retention is still quite good, but you do pull hard, and when you pull hard, you will lose speed now. So you're not kind of riding around on rails at that 24 degrees per second down to 20 degrees per second at low speed. But planes like the Mirage 2000, this is the 11.3 version, the matchup still plays out more or less the same as it did before. But because both of these planes are nerfed or changed, maybe there are some matchups that the MiG-23 MLD is going to struggle with now. The one thing I can think of is the F5E and potentially the F5C. I don't think the F4E is really going to threaten this thing, at least not in the hands of someone who's like has thumbs. But it's not quite going to be as brainless as it was before. You're still insanely fast. You still have insanely good acceleration for the tier, and you're still more on the maneuverable side than a pure missile boat. So overall, MLD I think is still going to be pretty decent. We'll probably have to go and play it out a little bit, probably have to test it out against a couple of other people, but so far this flight model, it's a lot different, don't get me wrong, feels completely different, but also doesn't feel completely bad. It feels more like a plane, it feels more like it should be. And the thing is, people hated this guy because he basically looked at manuals and showed the charts and sent them to Gaijin and said, hey, this is not right. And as it turns out, a lot of the premium planes in the game, they were fantasies. They were just overperforming. Like, everyone thought for some reason that folding the wings out on the MiG-23 ML made it into like an F-16, but a little bit better at low speed for some reason. Made it into like the best rate fighter the Soviet Union ever developed, and that's not really the case. The only anecdote is basically some Algerian, Dutch, foreign exchange student who did mercenary work for Algeria that only exists basically on a Russian fan-based plane website. There's like no evidence that the MiG-23 MLD, the MLA, that any of these planes were particularly maneuverable compared to like a Generation 4 fighters. Like, don't get me wrong, wasn't outright bad, wasn't outright worse than the Phantom or anything like that, but it was, broadly speaking, comparable to being slightly superior. Right now, the current iteration of the game, supposedly it's accurate to the charts. Energy retention-wise, probably not. I'm basing that on the Mirage, I'm basing that on the Grip, and I'm basing that on the F-16, basing on the fact that Gaijin can't get specific excess power right to save their lives. But overall, I think this flight model is going to be okay. It's still going to get clapped on by Mirage 2000. It's still probably going to get clapped on by the days that it's up-tiered against F-14s. But overall, I don't think the dynamic is going to change all that much. F5 is going to be a lot harder. You're going to have to work for it. But it still should be possible, I think. The ML and the MLA might be in a much worse position. I haven't tested them out yet. I haven't tried them out. I don't really play this plane a lot. And the kind of fighting style that it leads to, basically rate fighting, is like, this isn't my strong suit. This is not something I enjoy doing. But I figured I would test it out so people could get perspective and see that, like, hey, the plane's not completely ruined. It's not garbage. At the same time, a really good F4E might be a threat to this thing now. We'll wait and see. We'll wait and see how it goes on live server. I've got a couple people that are pretty decent in F4s that I can try this thing against. But right now, it seems okay. There are a bunch of other planes that have been changed due to bug reports. The Draken, the Vig, and the MiG-21 series, including the J-7E. The F-16 has its Oswald efficiency reduced by 0.001 on a Tuesday, which doesn't matter. But all of those other planes are going to be a lot different on the live server once it gets updated. The Draken is receiving a pretty substantial nerf, which means that in Sim it's probably not going to be able to kite around at low speeds like it used to. The good news for all of the US premium noobs is that the F5C and the F5E are not going to be touched because Gaijin has decided to use what amounts to a tertiary Soviet source that doesn't actually sample the planes, and they're basically just going on Soviet guesswork instead of going based on the actual flight manuals for the plane. So those planes are going to continue to be the way that they are. Overall, though, I think that changing some of these flight models around, making them more accurate, is going to be a net benefit to the game. I think a lot of people are extremely mad about it because a lot of people like buying things that are deliberately overpowered. And to those people, I say, cope. Anyways, that's pretty much my current thoughts on the flight model stuff, the Mirage 2000 specifically, and the game going forward. I don't know of any bug reports in the future. Potentially a MiG-29 one coming up to maybe fix the energy retention, although with the way that Gaijin acts, especially in regards to that plane in the Su-27, I really wouldn't hold my breath for any changes. And Magic Missile.